consider this. Those who maintain that the Earth is a globe that spins suggest that people standing at the equator are being whirled around at approximately 1,000 miles an hour. They further maintain that the Earth is spinning around the Sun at a speed of 67,000 miles per hour, and that our Sun is supposedly racing around the center of our galaxy at some 600,000 miles per hour. And yet, you and I both know that on many days it's possible to stand outside without a single hair being messed up by the breeze.
Now I'm keeping him perpendicular to the ground. Now, do you see the problem? The only way he could be looking toward the top of the bulge is if he's tilting his head down. He'd have to be looking down. He couldn't be standing straight up, looking straight out. The only way he's going to see the curve is if he's looking down. Let's keep PJ looking straight ahead, and I'm going to slide him down so that his eyeball essentially ends up on the ground.
Missouri was a place where I heard George Bush and Bill Clinton talking. Where, from the point of view I had, they certainly were friends, and they didn't recognize any party lines between them. That's something for the, a smoke and mirrors illusion for the public. It's not something they adhere to because they had exactly the same agenda, and that was for bringing in this new world order.
The opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be.
In 1543, the Polish astronomer Copernicus suggested the bizarre notion that the Earth is a round ball that circles the Sun. But his book emphasized it was only a hypothesis. He further avoided controversy by withholding the book for 13 years, and then by dying on the day it was published.
Looking straight out, and you're going to see the problem here. Look, at ground level, if his eyeball is on the ground and he's looking straight out, the ground is beginning to immediately curve downward. There's no bulge. There's no bulge. Balls, it don't work that way if you're standing perpendicular on top of it at any point on the ball. But yet every single curvature chart you're going to find is going to show this same kind of nonsense, where they either have the observer or the target at ridiculous angles, or they're forcing the observer.
They themselves awaken every single day to a freer, safer world because of George's book.
Sleeping Beauty Who can she be? Aha, here comes the prince. The prince is victorious. Democracy has fled. The prince breaks the magic spell with a kiss. The beautiful princess is Germany.
Learned men of science, I have listened to all your arguments. I now decree that our great Earth stands immovable as the hub of the universe, the supreme center of intelligent thinking. Thus, Ptolemy's decree was blindly accepted as the law of science for over 1,000 years.
We use plumb bobs to build buildings. In other words, to get the wall of a building going straight down, you'll take a string with a heavy weight hanging from it, and you make the building follow that string. That plumb bob will point to the center of a round Earth. That means that if you imagine that this was the correct Earth, you can imagine a plumb bob held here would point in that direction, the plumb bob held here would point in that direction. That means the buildings would be bigger on the top than at the bottom.
It would also mean that boats would constantly be sailing downhill.
But let's go ahead and shrink PJ and enlarge the ball for the sake of example here. Now, notice the lines are still curving downward and away in all directions, even though he's getting smaller and the ball is getting bigger. This never changes with scale. Okay, now let's zoom into tiny PJ on the massive ball here and consider the curvature word problem that was brought up by this individual serving in Iraq. If PJ was 6 feet tall and he had a clone, who's also 6 feet tall, right, who walked 1 mile away from him, the ground his clone would be standing on would be 8 inches lower than the ground that he was standing on, right? Again, the curvature math is 8 inches per mile squared. So the first mile, 1 times 1 is 1 times 8 is 8 inches. So the ground from point A to point B is going to be 8 inches below point A. Right, you with me so far? Now if the clone had a clone who walked another mile away, that clone's ground would be 32 inches below PJ's ground. Why? Because it's 8 inches per mile squared. 2 miles, okay, 2 times 2 is 4 times 8 is 32. So the ground that clone number 2 is standing on is 32, almost 3 feet below the ground that PJ is standing on. And if we had yet another clone who was to walk 1 more mile, his ground would be 72 inches or 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head would be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. I know for some of you the gerbil just jumped off the wheel, so let's look at it again. This time we'll check it out from a different angle. Again, PJ's clone walks 1 mile away. The top of his head would be 8 inches lower than PJ's. Another clone walks an additional mile, and the top of his head is then 32 inches below PJ's. The third clone walks 1 more mile, and at just 3 miles away from PJ, the ground clone number 3 is standing on is 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head is going to be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. Now, I'm not trying to see whether or not the person can see the other person. What I'm trying to show you is the issue of the ground level. The ground level is the issue that I'm focused on with this example. Because if clone number 3's ground is 72 inches below the ground that PJ is standing on, it's going to be physically impossible for PJ to look straight ahead or to the left or the right or behind him and ever expect to see the horizon at his eye level. It cannot be done. I'm going to say it again. If you're just looking straight ahead, there is no way the horizon could ever be at your eye level. When the ground you're standing on is immediately beginning to recede away from you in every direction, you're standing on a point on a ball, supposedly, the ground you're standing on immediately begins to recede away in every direction 8 inches per mile squared. Now, I understand we're not on a perfect beach ball, but you actually compound the problem if you start using the argument, well, there are, peaks and valleys and hills and mountains and plateaus and canyons and blah, blah, blah. All you're doing is pushing the problem further out, and eventually you, the ball earther who uses this argument, are the one who's in danger of falling off the edge of something, because you can extend that out only so far, and then you're going to have to correct the terrain back to that 8 inches per mile squared so that you can have your 25,000 mile circumference ball. Or pair if you choose to go by Neil deGrasse Tyson. But for this math to be true, and it has to be in order to maintain a 25,000 mile circumference, no person could ever look straight ahead and expect to see the horizon at his eye level.
And the brave, handsome knight, you know who he is.
Heil Hitler!
Heil Hitler! Heil! Heil Sprache! Heil and live voice! Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler!